All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Robert Balfance, the director of the Everyone Graduates Center, and I'd like to welcome you to our Pathways to Adult Success Solution Forum on holistic supports to help students connect, thrive, and persist in college. I think we've heard a lot about the challenges our K-12 students are facing in school, and what we want to really focus on today that the same is true for our college students, and in particular those that are first generation college goers, that they are having many of the same challenges we've heard about from our K-12 students. And we're very excited today to have presentations by the Boys and Girls Club of Peninsula, California, and the Achieve Atlanta and their scholars to really hear about from the ground, right, what some of these challenges are. And what are some good things that folks are doing to try to address them, right? So we're really helping us both understand what the challenges are and what some solutions are. And after we hear those presentations, there'll be time for Q&A after each presentation. And then we'll have some open discussion and resource sharing after that, where we encourage you to share your insights and resources. What does it take to provide the whole range of supports our students need to sort of thrive and succeed in post-secondary. Right. As always, we have a diverse group of folks on the call from different places, K-12, higher ed, nonprofits. We really encourage you to share your ideas and ask questions through the chat function. And again, you can do that as we go along in the sessions and also during the Q&As and the resource sharing. We will, as always, send out the recording afterwards, as well as share all the resources that were shared in the chat or by our presenters during the call today. So just to set this question up before we hear from our wonderful presenters, that in the work we're doing here on Pathways to Adult Success is really saying we have to take kids through K-12, give them guidance and advising on what's a good place to go post-secondary and how they get through that to sort of a family supporting wage. And we know that the pandemic has disrupted all of those systems, right? And really made uncertainty the norm. And when you put those things together, this momentum to and through post-secondary is being impacted. And I think that's really a crux of what you're going to hear today is the importance of momentum and the things that challenge momentum and things we can do to meet those challenges. So just to drive this home, the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights put out a recent synthesis of what we know about the impacts of the pandemics. And, unfortunately, it's no surprise, right? It says COVID-19 has raised new barriers for many post-secondary students and heightened the impacts for students of color, students with disability, and students who are caregivers, both for entry and for continuing and completing their studies. And then the last thing I want to show is earlier this year, we had a presentation from our friends from the Chicago Consortium on School Success and their research on Chicago and sort of the pathways students take through post-secondary. And one of the core findings they had from that, again, speaking to this challenge of momentum, is that momentum really mattered in Chicago. And really for students who stopped out of college, whether it was at a two-year community college or a four-year bachelor's degree institution, those that stopped out, very few of them actually came back, right? Almost all the kids that stopped out stayed out. And really, that really speaks to the importance of this idea of momentum and finding ways to keep students going through the challenges they have, and not sort of simply saying, well, maybe it's okay to pause, take a break, regather. That certainly works for kids in some situations, but the evidence is that on average, for lots of kids, especially kids from higher poverty environments, that when momentum is broken, it's hard to recover. So we're going to really focus today, I think, on how do we keep that momentum going. And with that, I would like to bring up our first group, future grads, Monique and Esme and I'll let them introduce themselves and share what they've been learning.
Thanks, Bob. So you can go to the next slide. Yeah. So my name is Monique Gagnon, and I'm the Senior Director of Impact and Measurement for the Boys and Girls Club. And my colleague who's going to be presenting in a few minutes, Esmeralda Ortiz, is the Vice President of High School and Post-Secondary Success Programs. And we're going to be specifically talking about the Future Grads program. But before we go into specifically that program, I want to give you a little bit background on the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula. So for those of you not from California, the Peninsula is literally the Silicon Valley. So it's where our headquarters are a few minutes from Google, Facebook, Apple, right in the middle of Silicon Valley. But within Silicon Valley, there are large pockets of areas where there are a lot of low-income families. And so it's not, there is a lot of wealth in Silicon Valley, but there are also a lot of areas where there are high areas of need for these families. And so what does our organization do and support? So we work with families, schools, and school districts. Oh, back. So we provide expanded learning opportunities through after-school programs. We have summer programs. We also offer programming during the school day. We have sports leagues. And then in addition, we also do this Future Grads program that we'll be going over in a minute. So next slide. So we serve about 3,000 students in kindergarten through post-secondary. And at the schools that we are serving, 90% of the students are on free reduced lunch. To give a little more context on that, free reduced lunch is a federal definition of poverty that's based on food, the cost of food, but doesn't fully give you the full idea of like how needy these families are. The average cost of a one-bedroom in our area is $3,000 for a month. So these families are living on $51,000 for a family of four for a year, and they're dealing with really high cost of rent. So there's a lot of specific needs in our area that we're trying to support. Next slide. So the Future Grads program supports students to and through college. So we start the program in 10th grade and it goes all the way until they graduate from college. So we provide the programming for these students and mentoring all the way until they graduate. Future Grads is also open to any student and any of our partner high schools. So we don't have any GPA requirement, or they don't need to necessarily be on a 4-year college track. We accept pretty much anybody who's interested in participating in our program. We also serve students from both who are interested in both 4-year and 2-year institutions. So students interested in 4 years, we help them through the application process, through applying for financial aid and all of that work. But we also help students transition to a 2-year college and then help them apply to a 4-year when they are ready. Next one. Just to give a little more context on why we focus on not just supporting students who are bound for a 4-year college, but also for a 2-year institution. These are national statistics from the National Student Clearinghouse that show students who graduate from a 4-year college within 6 years if they started at a 2-year. And so you can see for white students, it's about 50%, and for Latinos, it's 37%. And most of our population that we're serving is Latino. So we're really trying to make sure that we're supporting those students once they're in a 2-year college, that they can be successful into continuing on and graduating. So now I'm going to turn it over, I can go to the next slide, to Esme, who's going to give you a little more in-depth information about the program.
Awesome. Thank you, Monique. So we have some core pillars that our program essentially is grounded in as we work with students. And Monique alluded to several of these in terms of how we support students. We want to make sure that students understand the menu of options so that they're aware of really all the different college systems and college options they have. You'll see in a moment, although the majority of our students are staying local in California, in-state, we want to make sure that they understand all their options within state, out of state, private, public, 4-year, 2-year, and sort of can weigh for themselves the benefits of each. And in terms of being able to know their options, the second pillar is really around preparing for the systems that make the most sense for them. So making sure that they understand what coursework, what GPA is required for the various systems, and then how early they need to be working towards their college applications. Our program starts the summer before sophomore year of high school. And so that's intentional because within, the University of California, California state systems, sophomore and junior year are really the core years for academic preparation, at least for those four-year institutions. The third piece or pillar, I should say, is really around self-advocacy. So making sure that, as early as high school, students are learning how to advocate for themselves, for their academic needs, social emotional needs. Many of the self-advocacy, as well as networking, the building of relationships with peers, with adults, a lot of that is practicing the skills that we believe will make them successful college students. And then gratitude. We are really big on building the future grads community, which is primarily made up of first generation students and students of color. And so we want them to understand that they're part of this larger community, and that much of this work relies on those, relationships with each other, with the team. And so one just simple way that our students sort of show gratitude for really all the support they've received in the program is, for example, leading college tours, which we just did last week. So that's just one example of this pillar. But you'll see that within our programming, these 5 things are really core and present, primarily during high school, but then there's levels of it that continue at the post-secondary stage. If we move on to the next slide, we can see a little bit of a more detailed breakdown of what core things we focus on in each of the grade bands in high school and then at the post-secondary level. The entrance into the program is really the Summer Academy, a week-long conference and series of workshops where we're really diving deeply into everything that a first-gen student would need to know about college, about applying and pursuing college. And then throughout the school year, we work closely with our feeder high schools. We do monthly after-school workshops where we focus on certain pieces of the application process that are mapped sort of timely to what students need to know and focus on and be working towards in each of these grades. And much of 10th grade is really focused on academic, life skills, and really building a strong relationship with other students in the program, as well as with the future grads team. Junior year is really getting ready for senior year. We do college tours. We start with the personal statements, and we want students to finish junior year with a pretty solid college list. And then senior year is really all tied to the college application process and financial aid process, and then everything that comes after submitting applications. And this is, I think, some of the work that maybe isn't as obvious. A lot of the follow-up, the creating of portals, navigating housing orientations, a lot of the pieces that are gonna continue to support students with getting onto campus ready to go. And then our post-secondary programming starts with a post-secondary retreat where we transition all our seniors into, they get to meet who they're going to be working with while they're in college. And so during this week-long conference, we talk about things like culture shock. We make sure that students understand all the campus resources that they have access to, depending on which system they're enrolling in. We also, throughout the year, do plenty of academic advising, a lot of social emotional support, which is really present throughout the whole program, but we've seen students have higher need of this while they're in college, and then career readiness, which we're doing some level of while in high school, but really wanting to make sure that by their 3rd or 4th year of college, students have a sense of what kind of pathway they want to pursue after college. And to go into a little bit more around our post-secondary program, we want to make sure that during post-secondary retreat, we get a sense of what a student's academic goals are in terms of their post-secondary education, whether they're going straight to a 4-year, whether they're going to start at a community college and want to transfer to a 4-year institution. But we want to make sure that every student has a very clear idea of what they're working towards during that 1st year of college. Like I mentioned, we do a fair amount of academic advising. Most of our post-secondary program is in the form of quarterly check-ins for the majority of students, and a little bit more frequency with our community college students that require a bit more touch points. And during those sessions, there's key things that we focus on. One of the ongoing ones is academic advising to make sure that students are making good progress towards their unit count and the prerequisites for whatever they're looking to major in. We also want to make sure that if students are sharing any challenges, any barriers, that we refer them to any on-campus resources that they may not be aware of. And then I mentioned this already, but the transfer application support that looks a lot like the application support we provide during senior year, but making sure that we're helping students navigate the application process to be able to transfer. And that's part of why they need to have a pretty clear plan once they start college so that they can transfer within a 2 to 3 year period. We also remind students about financial aid renewal, whether that's FAFSA, the California Dream Act, or scholarships that are renewable. And then I mentioned the career preparation, the social emotional support. And again, cultivating this 1st-gen community, we also, as we've been growing the program, have connected students to other alum at their campuses that are part of future grads to make sure that they're networking and supporting each other. And if we move on to the next slide, we can just get a sense of the scale of our program and our number of participants that we've had. We have been, like I mentioned, growing our number of post-secondary students. And I would say at a quicker rate than we're necessarily exiting right now or graduating. And so this is just to give you a sense of where we are at currently. And then in the next slide, you can see the breakdown of where our college students are currently enrolled. Majority are enrolled at a 4-year institution. We are expecting our community college numbers to continue to increase as more students opt for this option. And I'll say that of these 80 students, I would say the majority did receive a 4-year acceptance when they graduated high school, but decided to go to community college for financial reasons, among others. And then I think in the final slide. Oh, that was the final slide. Okay. So I'll stop there, and I think.
Thank you. So yeah, if people have questions, please put them in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'll start off with a couple. So first one is just a little more of a organizational question, and then a little more of a content. So just organizationally, in the 10 through 12 part of the program, are they coming to the Boys and Girls Club to get those services, or is it in their schools?
So it's a mix of both. The majority, the core of the programming is actually happening at their campuses, okay, with some activities taking place within our clubhouses.
Okay. And then the post-secondary, are you going to them on their campus, or are they meeting you somewhere, or is it a mix?
It's mostly remotely.
Okay.
We were doing remote programming before the pandemic,
Okay. Okay.
these check-ins. And then when we are doing college tours for our younger high school students, we are meeting with them in person if we are going
Gotcha.
to the institution.
That makes good sense. So then my two content ones, and we'll open it up. The gratitude piece is interesting. Is there any story on how that became one of your pillars, or what led to that?
So it actually came from the students in the sense that they were eager to sit on panels to talk to the younger students in our program. And there's a couple moments throughout all our programming, particularly in high school, where our college students are in front of our high school students sharing about their experiences, their successes, and wanting to genuinely support the next generation of the future cohorts. And then there's also a piece that I actually didn't mention during senior year, where we actually engage volunteers from the community to work with our students one-on-one to further support them navigate, college applications. And so there's a piece around that where students are pretty consistently practicing this skill. And it also came out of, just the idea that we want our students to be able to build positive relationships with the adults at their school, as this hasn't always been something that has organically happened. So that's a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's very fascinating, because we know that from the school connectedness research that being engaged in pro-social activities is a very powerful connector, and that seems to fit very much with that. And then my last question, and then I'll open up, sorry, is that just on our theme of momentum in the pandemic, what have you been seeing on that? Are there been certain challenges that were not there before, or they sort of just been intensified challenges that were there as far as what keeps kids staying in post-secondary?
So I think one of the key pieces that we've seen a lot of students struggle during the pandemic, and I would say particularly our community college students. And it's a little bit mixed in terms of our four-year students who was able to move on to campus and continue to do classes remotely from their dorm rooms, for example. And that was, I think, one of the key challenges with our community college students, that they're local, and they it's harder for them to feel a sense of community with other college students. And so we're already sort of brainstorming how we can create that and leverage our clubhouse spaces to create more of a community for our community college students who I think most struggled during the pandemic. However, one of the key pieces that I think has allowed for this not enrolled only to be 18 compared to our larger number is the deep relationships that the students have with our team.
Yeah.
Caseloads are right now still small enough where students can reach out to our post-secondary team members to talk through sort of any challenges, folks that can cheer on their successes. So I think the relationship with the adults that they hold in the program, as well as any that carried over with their coach while they were a senior, that I think that's a key piece to both getting students to respond when a lot of this is remote, right. And also to continue to stay enrolled in their higher ed institution. I think the other piece is that we do a really good job during the high school years to not stigmatize any pathway, and to say that this is really about what you want to pursue, and we're going to support you to get there, but not necessarily placing any value or judgment on any pathway. And I'll say that that's a shift we made. That wasn't always true, but that has been a shift that I think has allowed students to feel safe and to be much more honest about how they're doing in terms of their progress, and to troubleshoot with the staff if they need to, change course or pathway.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you. Anne, I see we have a question in the chat.
Yeah, we just have one question. Francis is asking who helps with the core selection of students? Or maybe another way would be to ask, could you clarify how students are selected for the program?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the program's open to any student from any of our partner campuses. And actually during the pandemic, we opened that up because everything was remote. We wanted to extend the invitation to any student, particularly the students in our smaller charter schools within our communities. But essentially a student just needs to attend one of the campuses where we're doing our programming. We don't have any GPA requirements since we're open to supporting students with any pathway. And once they hit junior year, that's when we want to just confirm whether they're committed to continuing in the program, so that helps us plan for senior year and which staff member is going to be working with what core group of students. But it's really just students' engagement and their desire to go to college.
Wonderful. All right, so we'll have another chance at the end for our next presentation to have general questions for those that come up. But now I want to shift us to our friends from Achieve Atlanta Scholars and Susanne, and ask her to introduce herself and share what they're learning.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation to speak and share about our work today. My name is Susanne Diggs-Wilborn, and I serve as the Vice President for College Success at Achieve Atlanta. And so I'll tell you a little bit about us first, and then about some of the research, qualitative and quantitative research we've been doing on our students in the last 2 or 3 years, sort of pre and during pandemic. So who are we? Achieve Atlanta is really, next 2 slides actually. Thank you. So who are we? We are, an organization, and you can see here what our mission is, but we're really about accessing, affording, and earning a post-secondary credential. And we are we actually shifted our vision a little bit after Raj Shetty's, the economist from Stanford, I think he's at Harvard now, did some research on social mobility. And Atlanta is one of those cities that has some of the worst social mobility in the United States, and in fact can be compared to many developing countries. A child born into poverty has about a 4% chance of reaching the upper quartile, the 4th quartile of income in Atlanta. And so we're really about increasing the social mobility for our scholars, but also, who are our students? Who are the scholars that we work with? And so on the next slide, we have a little bit of a profile. Thank you. This year, we added about another 700 Achieve Atlanta scholars to our program. We continue to support 1/3 of all Atlanta Public School graduates, and that's who we work with exclusively. About roughly 25% of our scholars attend HBCUs. About 21% attend college out of state. And that's actually an increase since the pandemic. We had about 15 to 17% who went to school out of state prior to the pandemic, and now we're at about 21%. About 22% pursue an associate's degree, and about 2% pursue a technical degree. And fully half of our scholars are first generation. And just to note a little bit about how we work through partnerships. And so there are some similarities when I was listening to the presentation before with the Boys and Girls Club. In high school, we have partnerships with Atlanta Public Schools. We have a partnership with the College Advising Corps and with One Goal. And so in the 11th and 12th grade, we work through these partnerships to support a college going culture, to apply for scholarships, apply for financial aid, apply to college, go on college visits, but then also to especially apply for the Achieve Atlanta Scholarship. Our students have to be Pell Times 1.5 eligible to receive our scholarship and have attended at Atlanta Public Schools, high schools in the last 2 years of high school. We provide a $5,000 scholarship for a 4-year degree, so $5,000 per year for 4 years within a 5-year period, which means that if a student stops out, they're not penalized. They can actually use that money. It's a $20,000 ceiling, but they can still use that money to complete their degree. Very similarly for the 2-year and technical programs, we provide a $1,500 a year for 2 years within a 3-year period, again, accounting for the stop out potentially. We also, on the post-secondary side, we have 10 post-secondary partners and 2 nonprofit partners that provide coaching and advising. Of our post-secondary partners, 7 of them are USG, University System of Georgia institutions. We have 2 private schools, 1 technical college system of Georgia school. And then we also, on the Achieve Atlanta side, have hired a college success fellow who is responsible for providing that extra social emotional support to our students who attend a 2-year and a technical school that is within our partnership. And the last thing I'll say about the partnership is that, you know, we have this infrastructure where we work directly with our partners on campus. And we run a peer ambassador or peer mentoring program through Achieve Atlanta at those partner institutions. We also help support them to broker the resources that are needed on those campuses, and also providing coaching and advising. This year, the other thing that we're doing that's a little bit different is that we are running a pilot for our out-of-state scholars. And those who requested a coach, about half of the students who requested a coach, we provided an out-of-state coach for them. And so we will look to see over the next couple of years how the students who received the coach versus those who did not fare, and whether or not we want to continue with that practice. Typically, our students who go to school out of state go to more competitive institutions that are also well-funded, that have great college success support programs. But we want to make sure that our students, particularly after the pandemic, feel fully supported. So next slide, please. Yes, so we've done some research and both qualitative and quantitative research. We did a regression analysis on data from our past cohorts. And we have found that the high school GPA, as you've seen, for many years, high school GPA is the strongest predictor of persistence to the second year of college. We also found with our scholars that those working more than 20 hours per week were half as likely to persist to year 3. And that those who were less involved on campus or who worked less than 6 hours or had less than 6 hours of campus activities were half as likely to persist to year 4. So these were some trends that obviously were concerning to us. And we wanted to make sure that we had a way to address some of these concerns. And so we also did some qualitative research, and we wanted to hear what exactly our scholars were saying. And so on this next slide, you can see actually they fall into 4 categories. There's the next slide. There's the lack of sense of belonging, or what we call engagement on campus. About 5 years ago, when we started doing this work, sense of belonging was sort of the key word in terms of understanding what students, that concept of feeling connected to the campus. Over time, we have evolved that language to be around engagement. So similarly in the work setting, you have engagement surveys for employees versus satisfaction. So you can be satisfied and go to work every day and read the paper and do nothing. You could be completely satisfied, but I guarantee you your boss would not be. Versus engagement, which is really around loyalty. It's around trust in the organization, and wanting to be a part of it. And it's very similar for students. And so you can see in some of the comments, really wanting to be a part of the campus is a big piece for our students, and really focusing on not just this belonging, which means that, or just fitting in, because fitting in for students meant that they had to change themselves, but really belonging, which means that they are accepted for who they are when they come to campus. As you can see, remote learning continues to be a concern for students. COVID has taken a heavy toll. I think Bob talked about that at the very beginning. And the Boys and Girls Club, same thing. We're seeing it across the board, and I'm sure you are as well. And then academic preparation. Under normal circumstances, students who are coming out of high school find it to be a culture shock, that they have so much time that they're responsible for themselves, and that no one's going to tell them which class to take next or to get up or do any of those things. It's been even more challenging over the last couple of years for our students. So what are we doing, both through our partners, but also at Achieve Atlanta? We've done a couple of things, and I'll take them one by one. At Achieve Atlanta, we are providing our scholars with some additional direct supports, and we're helping our partners better support that persistence. We have, through regression analysis, and it should be noted that Achieve Atlanta, when these students go to college, that first year, we probably have the most data than anyone on them. We have the high school data, but we also have the self-report data that they provide to us. And so we are able to run a regression analysis that's been pretty predictive for the last couple of years on what students might need extra support coming into college. And so with our partners, we have this conversation early on to make sure that our scholars are connected to them and to resources prior to midterms, because once midterms hit, it's harder to reverse the trend. So we're using that likelihood rating to drive attention to and focus attention on those scholars who might need the most support going into college. We have also provided emergency grants. We provided them before the pandemic. Of course, it's stepped up since the pandemic. And so when these emergency medical needs or emergency needs arise, we're able to provide that up to $500 in emergency funds that they do not have to pay back as a grant to help get them over through whatever situation they are in. And then we also have, for the last 2 years, provided behavioral health services. And so this is really for acute issues, things that arise, immediately. The scholars call a number, and it's for the scholars and their families. They are eligible for up to 6 sessions, either counseling, psychological, trauma support, as well as financial support or counseling. And so scholars call into a number, they're triaged, and they're provided with 6 sessions. And there is every attempt to sort of transition them back to the campus and supports that are there. But that is also something we're still working on. It is not as smooth a transition as we would like it to be, should they need ongoing care. But we do provide the immediate support. On the partner side, there are a couple of different things that they're doing that we think are pretty innovative. At Clayton State, we, in terms of food insecurity, food, housing, and transportation insecurity has been huge and has sort of exploded during the pandemic. And there's a lot of shame for students who have to go and ask for help or go to a food pantry for many of them. And so what's great is that at Clayton State, there are these QR codes that signs around the campus. Students are able to take their phones and scan that QR code. And then they are able to, within about 3 hours, have a meal available for them on campus in the cafeteria. And so one of the things that's sort of also great about this is that, students don't have to go anywhere to get anything. They just walk into the food service place like any other student and get a meal. If they do scan this code more than 3 times, then the center that provides the code that provides the services is alerted, and they come in for counseling to look for a longer term plan to support the student, because that indicates to them that there's more of a chronic need there. At Georgia State, they are, the king of data analytics when they're looking at their students. They're also partners. And one of the things they've done is looked at the students who are working and their course load, and then also their grades and any alerts on their account, on their record. And what they've done is started bringing those students in for personalized advising, because what we have seen in Atlanta, and I don't know what this looks like in other places, it may be the same, but the job market has exploded, and the pay for those jobs is way more than sometimes some of our partners make on campus. And so students are, excited about that money. They are not as excited about staying in school, especially if it compromises their ability to work. And so those students are seen as the most at risk, especially those who register for online classes when there is an in-person class available. That's another sort of a red flag for them, for Georgia State, because those students know that it's better to be in class, but are taking online classes because it fits around their work schedule, and they're at higher risk. So they're brought in to have personalized counseling sessions, and also the development of a longer term plan that says, you have a job, but not a career. Education is your key to a career. So let's talk about how, you not abandon your job, but how do we keep the trains running on both tracks? The last thing with our nonprofit coaching partners, Beyond 12 and Edutech, is that we have taken the students who were enrolled last spring, but have stopped out this past fall. And one of the things we did was keep those students on the caseload of both of our nonprofit partners. The criteria was that they were enrolled the previous spring, but they were also engaged with their coach. And so the idea is that if they can get this targeted coaching during this school year, that we can get them re-enrolled in the fall of 2022. And the coaching and the plan are really around developing goals, an action plan, and then meeting with their coach to not only develop that, but also to implement it and stay on track. And so to date, we actually have targets for our partners. They are, the target is 25% of the students who are on their caseload to be re-enrolled by the fall of 2022. This spring already, we have 14% of the scholars who are on Edutech's caseload have re-enrolled for the spring, and 17% of the Beyond 12 scholars who are on those caseloads have re-enrolled for the spring. So we're really hopeful that we can get the remaining students on the caseload for the fall. What we know is that students want to be seen. They have individual needs. That's the biggest thing that's emerged for us this last couple of years. And so meeting them where they are as an individual, not as this group of students who are fill in the blank, but actually seeing them and their individual struggles is key to actually engaging them and getting them the help that they need. And then on this last slide, because we also do work on the high school side as well, there are a couple of things that we're doing on that end as well. And so from a match and fit perspective, Achieve Atlanta and Atlanta Public Schools actually partnered to develop the match and fit tool. Students start to use that in the 11th grade to see what schools are available to them from a match standpoint, financially, from the programs that are offered, but also a fit from a culture standpoint, what schools would great for them. So they're already starting to target them in the 11th grade, and in the 12th grade, they have a more targeted list to apply to schools with. And there's actually a goal for our CAC advisors that students have to apply to at least 3 schools and complete the FAFSA. So we want to make sure that they're building a more balanced college list, that they're not undermatching. And that's a particular concern for us. In addition, we are providing more training and capacity building on the high school side so that students understand what their financial aid packages look like before they make a decision. They can make a more informed decision with their parents and their families. But also looking at really looking closely and critically at those award letters and the verification and understanding the implications of taking out loans. So that's it from me.
Thank you. That was incredibly rich, and we'll be taking questions, and I see ones in the chat, and I'm just gonna kick it off, and maybe even just as much a comment as a question is that it's just fascinating that you work with a set of partners, you can learn from all of them, right? And you can help take learnings from one to another and move them, and share them is a great role. And what struck me when you were showing those examples of the the various places is each one in its way was doing a sort of an important foundational thing, right? The idea of reducing the friction to get help, right? We know that help's available. You just got to find this office and go show up and then present your case and get in line, and that's a lot of friction. Whereas scan a code on a poster, you could be anonymous, go in, show your phone, get your meal, right? That really reduces the friction, right? It doesn't make it a task to get help. So that's powerful. And then the Georgia State, right, was really about, I can't get the phrase right, but trying to be like the wise uncle or something like that, right? That it's I notice you're spending a lot of time at work and less time at school, and I understand it for the moment, but maybe that's not the best long-term plan, right? And just sort of using their analytics to be able to play that role.
Yeah. And you actually said something, your first comment in terms of reducing the friction. I think what has been great about having our partners is this honesty and the recognition of the unintentional barriers that our students face that, from their perspective, wow, this is really, we created this great service. But from the student's perspective, it's, barrier after barrier that they have to go through to get to it, whether it's because there's an accountability attached to it or something. And so it's been great to be able to put that additional lens and have partners who are willing and open to re-examine their practices and get the most out of whatever support they put into place.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last one I think was just so notable was the third example where it's extending institutional supports when you're outside an institution. And that's why stopping out is so damaging, I believe, especially to first generation or lower income students, is because suddenly they're without institutional support and it's all on themselves to get back there. And as we just said, there's a lot of friction to getting back there and really no clear paths and uncertainty. And this is saying, we understand you've temporarily left the institution, but we're going to keep our institutional supports with you to help you, give you time to come back. And I just think that's another really powerful recognition that the responsibility of the institution at some level doesn't necessarily end just because you left the institution temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big mindset shift, right? Because, historically, we serve those that are part of us. And when you leave us, you're on your own. So.
Yeah, I again, what we keep hearing is that students want to be seen as individuals, not as this first generation group that is experiencing all these different issues, but who am I as an individual? Because my problems are unique.
Yeah.
And so I want to be seen and I want to have that person. We talk often in our team, my director of post-secondary success, the college, our program officer, and our college fellow, we talk about who is my person? Who is my person that I can go to on campus that I trust? They may not be the person who can resolve it, but they can point me in the right direction. But I have that person and I have that connection. And I know that, I'm secure in the knowledge that something good will happen if I just stay connected. They'll help me.
Yeah, it's so powerful, right? That there's somebody who believes and cares about me as a person, right? And is trying to help me in sort of a non-judgmental way, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah. So key. So thank you for that work. Anne, I see we have a question.
Brianna asks, I'm interested to learn which specific metrics you find to be most predictive of post-secondary persistence. For example, overall high school GPA, senior year course grades, attendance, college match, financial aid, et cetera?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So we have found that GPA, absenteeism or attendance, and whether or not they have failed in an English or a math course in high school, those are the most predictive of actually transitioning to college and persisting in that first year. We also know that if we can get students through that first year, first and second term, they're more likely to persist beyond, to complete their degree. We lose so many students, I think nationwide, we lose so many students in their second term, and we don't get them back. And so if they can find a way to navigate in that first year, some of those foundational skills, they're well on their way. And pretty much if they can figure it out to sophomore year with it, whatever supports they have, they're good to go. But it's that first year, sort of first to second year persistence, keeping them in, and then that's using those skills and building on them in the second year that will give them that long-term success. Does that answer all of your questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there's another question. My colleagues who are watching ask what difficulty of courses you need. I guess the question is, what level of difficulty courses should students be taking in high school to promote college persistence?
It was more of a follow-up question of what the factors that influence the post-secondary persistence. Does the level of difficulty of the coursework, does that seem to impact it also?
Absolutely. We have what's now, we used to have the remedial courses. Now we have what's called the co-requisite courses. And so students who enter in on level, who do not have to take co-requisite courses, which used to be called remedial, mostly in math and English, stand a better chance of persisting and completing. So that means that they take the most competitive courses they can in high school, not necessarily AP, but solid foundation that they probably will sort of test out and come in on level. The problem with co-requisite courses is that you don't get the full credit and you have all these hours, right? So you have the hours of the course, the supplemental learning, the tutoring, which takes so much time, but they don't get that full credit just for the course, but not for all the other hours that they're spending trying to get through the course. And it also prevents them from taking other courses that they need in general ed to progress through their degree.
The problem too, over the years with honors and not AP, is there are no national standards. So getting like in my favorite assignment, we had no honors after sophomore year because it went English 9 honors, English 10, and then into AP Lit and AP Lang, because I work with a nominal principle that is like, why are we giving away accelerated or weighted credit that leads to nothing? All honors should eventually lead to AP credit. So we had no honors algebra 1. Anything that is where you should be at that grade level, we did not. And plus, we don't even really know what honors is from teacher to teacher, really, and right until you get to common assessment. So how we get people to think more about the AP part, and then you don't have to excel or even get a certain outcome on the AP test, but how done well, I should say, AP is in terms of preparation for the collegiate environment, right, that students are learning.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I think, we're really talking about rigor. And whatever it looks like, right? Yes. Whatever the course name is, we're talking about rigor. But we're also talking about what do we do with students once they get to school and they've had these courses, what is it that we're asking them to be able to do? And so one of the things that we actually looked at when I first started with Achieve Atlanta was articulation agreements, right? So what is the articulation agreement between you saw that a lot back in the day with voc ed. I'm dating myself, but vocational education had those articulation agreements. I think they're still a great idea so that you know what to expect
Right.
when you transition from high school to college.
Yeah,
And there are
absolutely.
some informal ones, but I think that is one of the ways that we're actually going to get understanding on both sides as to what's really, really needed for a student. to be
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
Yeah,
you for that. I
yeah.
agree.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add one little piece to that, is that in building on, so we did some similar work with Boston and found very similar things to what you found in Atlanta. And my bumper sticker was sort of like decent grades and challenging classes. It's both matters, the challenging classes. And then the interesting thing was like, you need to get B's in those things. You don't have to be like a straight A student to succeed in college, but you need to be like a decent grade in a challenging class, because essentially that's what you have to do in college, right? Essentially the classes in college are challenging and you got to get a decent grade. And it's hard to not do that, to suddenly start doing that. And so that's why I think it becomes a very strong predictor.
The other thing that we're also starting to see is, I shouldn't say starting to see, we're starting to name is executive functioning skills, because that's what's running in the background. If you think about an operating system, that's what's operating in the background so that students can actually do the work and be successful. It's like, how do you take notes? How do you organize your time? Those kinds of, how am I perceived and how do I want to come across so that, I build my self-esteem and not destroy it. All those things are sort of operating in the background in order for you to be successful, but that's harder to support. It's time consuming. And what's happening is the trend we're seeing is that it's being addressed under behavioral health challenges. It's all coming out with the pandemic, right? So now it's this package of executive functioning, anxiety, depression. You've got all this stuff sort of wrapped in there, but at least, you have a professional that's supporting and trying to now provide some help in figuring out how to best help the student.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody, our two presenters today, for wonderfully rich presentations on how we sort of really provide these holistic supports. I think that really came out. Our kids at all levels need these holistic supports, and how do we do that? And I think we actually just had a nice open discussion. And this is the point: if folks have resources, please put them in the chat from your organization or your school or your district on things you've done that you found have been helpful to provide these holistic supports to students in college, or even before college, getting ready for college. Please share them, and we'll share them out with everybody. We have upcoming solution forums in end of March and end of April. And we're teasing a little bit. We have a new podcast series that's going to be debuting soon to sort of share the learnings from the folks in our Pathways to Adult Success consortium in a different way. And just wonderful for everyone's participation today. And I want to thank you, and be well and onward. Take care.